Among the many villains and cosmic beings that populate Adventure Time, none embody pure inevitability as profoundly as the Lich. From the moment of his introduction, he represents not simply danger or destruction, but something deeper, the whisper that all life, no matter how bright or joyous, must eventually collapse into nothing. To explore the philosophy of the Lich is to examine the series' most direct confrontation with despair itself. The Lich first appears in the two-part story of Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil. His design alone communicates his role. A skeletal figure draped in dark robes, gaunt and deathlike, stripped of the playfulness that defines much of Oo's population. Where other characters are colourful and round, he is sharp, angular, and empty. His presence instantly shifts the tone. He does not joke, sing, or even fight with flourish. He moves with cold purpose, as though destruction is not a choice, but a law of nature. From the beginning, the Lich is framed not as a monster to be defeated, but as inevitability made flesh. Princess Bubblegum describes him with fear and finality, as though his emergence is less an event than a recurrence. The fact that he was once imprisoned inside amber, locked away rather than destroyed, foreshadows this theme. He cannot be killed because he is not only a being, but a principle. He is the void pressing against every wall, the silence waiting behind every sound. His voice reinforces this role. Voiced with chilling restraint by Ron Perlman, the Lich speaks slowly, deliberately, with an authority that seems less like opinion and more like fact. He tells Finn, "Fall, you are alone, child." These words are not insults, but declarations, as if he is merely naming the reality he believes to be inevitable. In contrast to villains who rant or rage, the Lich does not need to convince. He embodies the certainty of negation, and his language reflects this. The first major clash between Finn and the Lich in Mortal Folly dramatizes the confrontation between youthful hope and cosmic despair. Finn, eager to prove himself a hero, charges forward with energy and optimism. The Lich responds with silence, stillness, and calm destruction. The battle is uneven, because it is not just physical, it is philosophical. Finn is not fighting a monster. He is fighting the claim that resistance itself is meaningless. This theme deepens in the Lich episode, when the villain manipulates Finn and Jake into retrieving the Encayridion, a book of ultimate magical knowledge. Through Billy, their idol, the Lich corrupts the very idea of heroism. By wearing Billy's body as a disguise, the Lich demonstrates his philosophy in action. Even ideals can be hollowed out. Heroism itself, he suggests, is fragile, destined to collapse into nothing, just like kingdoms, and lives. Finn's devastation at this betrayal is crucial. It forces him to realize that the void does not only threaten bodies, but also meanings. The Encayridion becomes the perfect symbol in this story. A book meant to guide heroes, filled with knowledge and potential, is twisted into a key for annihilation. What was once a beacon of meaning becomes a tool for negation. The Lich does not destroy objects directly. He corrupts them, hollows them, reveals their fragility. The Encayridion, like Billy, becomes evidence of his philosophy. Nothing is sacred, nothing is immune, nothing endures. Yet Finn's resistance also begins here. Though devastated by Billy's corruption, he refuses to surrender. His confrontation with the Lich is as much about asserting meaning as it is about winning a battle. When he fights, he is not only defending Oo, he is declaring that hope and connection are not as fragile as the Lich claims. Finn's very existence becomes a rebuttal, not a denial of fragility, but a refusal to accept fragility as futility. The Lich's philosophy is clearest when he finally speaks at length in the comet. Reduced to a skeletal husk, he tells Finn that existence is a mistake, that life is endless suffering, and that non-existence is the only cure. This is the purest statement of his worldview: inevitability as liberation. To him, annihilation is not cruelty, but mercy. By erasing everything, he believes he is ending the cycle of pain. It is a twisted inversion of compassion, a claim that the only true kindness is silence. This philosophy resonates because it touches on a real temptation. Who has not, in moments of despair, wondered if existence is meaningless, if suffering outweighs joy, if silence would be easier? The Lich gives voice to that temptation, articulating despair with chilling clarity. He does not rant or rage, he explains, and that calmness makes his words all the more persuasive. But Adventure Time resists. Finn, having grown from child to young man, answers not with elaborate arguments, but with simple conviction. He knows pain, loss, and disappointment, but he still chooses life. His refusal is not naive optimism, but matured resilience. Against inevitability, he offers choice. Against despair, he offers affirmation. The Lich insists that all ends in silence. Finn insists that meaning is made in the act of living. Thus, the Lich's role in the story is not merely to be defeated, but to sharpen the philosophy of the heroes. He represents inevitability so that others may affirm resilience. He whispers despair so that Finn may declare hope. His inevitability is never truly eradicated. Even when transformed into Sweet Pea, the void lingers, but his certainty is undermined. Life continues, communities endure, stories are told. The Lich loses not because he is destroyed, but because his philosophy is resisted. In the end, Chapter 1 of his story sets the stage for everything that follows. The Lich is not just a villain, but the embodiment of inevitability, the skeletal reminder that all things collapse. His corruption of Billy, his manipulation of the Encayridion, and his calm declarations of despair all serve the same purpose: to test whether meaning can withstand fragility. And the answer, again and again, is yes. Fragility does not erase meaning. It creates the conditions for resilience. The Lich represents the void, but in resisting him, discovers its voice. To understand the philosophy of the Lich, we must first look back to his origins in the world of Adventure Time. Unlike most villains in the Lich is not born from a kingdom, a rivalry, or a single act of ambition. He is born from destruction itself, a residue of annihilation left behind by the Mushroom War. His very existence is the scar of humanity's downfall, the embodiment of the void that follows violence. In this sense, the Lich is not simply a villain in Oo's present, but a reminder of its past, a living echo of the mistakes that nearly ended the world. The Mushroom War, a catastrophic event only glimpsed in fragments throughout the series, reshaped Earth into the surreal, magical Ooh. In its wake, magic mingled with technology, and new life emerged from the ruins. Most of Ooh celebrates this renewal. Candy people, rainicorns, and countless other strange beings thrive. But the Lich is the opposite. He is what did not heal. Where most of the world rebuilt, he remained as festering decay, proof that not everything can be remade. His origins tie him to entropy, not as philosophy, but as fact. He is literally born of collapse. His first imprisonment reflects this role. The Lich is discovered and sealed in amber beneath the tree fort long before Finn and Jake are born. The fact that he is locked in a cocoon of hardened resin rather than killed emphasizes his inevitability. No one believes he can be destroyed. The best they can do is contain him, delay him, keep him suspended. This imagery, the skeletal figure trapped in amber, is symbolic of despair itself, buried, hidden, but never gone. Like trauma or memory, it waits beneath the surface, threatening to break free. When Finn and Jake encounter him in Mortal Folly, they are not meeting a newly risen enemy, but something ancient. His escape is not an invasion, but a recurrence, the return of something that has always been waiting. This cyclical nature reveals his philosophy in miniature. He insists that destruction always returns, that nothing endures. His very presence proves his point. He was trapped, but he returned. The amber cracked, and the void walked again. The connection between the Lich and the Mushroom War underscores a critical philosophical point. Annihilation is part of humanity's legacy. Ooh may seem whimsical, but it is built on ruins. The Lich embodies the possibility that the joy and colour of this new world are fragile overlays atop a foundation of death. He reminds us that history itself is haunted by negation, that no amount of candy-coated optimism can erase the shadow of collapse. His origins make him not only a villain of the present, but the embodiment of the past refusing to be forgotten. This also explains why he seeks the Encayridion. The book, presented early in the series as a guide for heroes, is deeply tied to the history of Ooh. It represents accumulated wisdom, the attempt to pass on meaning across generations. By corrupting it into a tool of annihilation, the Lich symbolically attacks the very idea of legacy. If he was born from the ruins of the old world, his goal is to ensure that no new world can inherit meaning. He wants to erase the cycle of renewal, to ensure that nothing follows collapse. The Encayridion's role as both guide and weapon illustrates the fragility of meaning. To Finn, it is a heroic artifact, proof that he belongs in the lineage of defenders of Ooh. To the Lich, it is merely a key, a way to reach cosmic powers and bend them toward nothingness. This duality reflects his philosophy, that even the most sacred texts are vulnerable to corruption. What one generation builds, another can hollow. Finn's involvement in this story is equally symbolic. As a boy striving to be a hero, Finn represents the possibility of renewal after collapse. He is a child of Ooh, born into a world shaped by the Mushroom War, yet determined to protect it. When he is tricked into retrieving the Encayridion for the Lich, he learns a devastating lesson, that even his own heroism can be co-opted by despair. The void does not always attack directly. Sometimes it deceives, using hope itself as a weapon. This realization is formative, forcing Finn to grow beyond naive optimism into resilient conviction. The Lich's early story also reveals the limits of containment. The amber prison, seemingly unbreakable, cracks. The Encayridion, seemingly incorruptible, is twisted. Billy, seemingly the greatest hero, becomes a vessel. These collapses demonstrate the Lich's central claim, that all defences fail. Yet the fact that Finn continues to resist despite these failures is the counterpoint. The void may always return, but resistance can return too. Containment is fragile, but resilience is renewable. Thematically, the Lich's origins connect him to the concept of inevitability not only in philosophy, but in history. He is what remains when civilizations collapse. His return is the nightmare that history will repeat itself, that destruction will always come again. In this sense, he is both personal and collective, a threat to Finn as a boy, and a threat to Ooh as a civilization. His amber prison beneath the tree fort is not just a plot device, it is a metaphor for the buried traumas of history, always threatening to resurface. What makes the Lich compelling is that his philosophy feels justified by his origins. He does not invent despair out of nothing. He is born from it. The Mushroom War did collapse a world. Kingdoms did fall. Legacies were lost. His claim that all things end is not abstract. It is lived history. This is what makes him persuasive. He does not speak as a madman, but as evidence. His very existence is proof of the void's persistence. Yet Adventure Time does not let this evidence stand alone. The same Mushroom War that gave rise to the Lich also gave rise to Oo's bizarre, vibrant life. For every shadow he embodies, there is colour that resists him. The amber may have cracked, but so did the seeds of renewal. The Candy Kingdom, Marceline's survival, even Finn's birth, all are products of the same history. The Lich's origins are real, but so is the resilience that grew alongside him. His philosophy tells half the story. Oo tells the other half. By exploring the Lich's origins and first prison, we see the philosophical stakes of his character. He is not just another villain, but the embodiment of history's darkest truth, that destruction is real, inevitable, and enduring. Yet by resisting him, Finn and Oo demonstrate that inevitability is not the final word. Renewal, memory, and resilience persist alongside collapse. The amber may hold despair, but it also holds the possibility of hope breaking free. The story of the Lich cannot be separated from the story of the Encayridion. From its first introduction, the book is framed as a guide to heroism, a text meant to inspire, instruct, and preserve ideals across generations. For Finn, the Encayridion is more than parchment and ink. It is proof that he belongs in the lineage of heroes. Yet when the Lich twists it into a key for annihilation, the book becomes something else entirely, a symbol of how even ideals can be corrupted. This dual role, heroic guide and destructive tool, embodies the heart of the Lich's philosophy. The Encayridion first appears in the episode aptly titled The Encayridion. We'll say Encayridion here. In this early adventure, Finn is sent on a quest to retrieve the book, proving himself worthy by passing trials of courage, kindness, and wisdom. The episode frames the text as a sacred object, not merely because of its contents, but because of what it represents. For Finn, obtaining the Encayridion confirms his place among heroes. He is not just a boy with a sword, but part of something larger, a tradition that values virtue over brute strength. The book symbolises meaning, continuity, and the possibility that ideals can outlast individual lives. This symbolism is what makes its later corruption so devastating. When the Lich manipulates Finn into retrieving the Encayridion in the Lich, the book's meaning is inverted. What was once a guide to heroism becomes a gateway to annihilation. The jewels of power, embedded in Oo's rulers, combined with the book, allow access to the multiverse. The Lich, wearing Billy's form, does not want the Encayridion for wisdom, but for destruction. He turns the very object that represents ideals into a tool of despair. This corruption reveals the fragility of symbols. The Encayridion seemed incorruptible, ancient, sacred, bound to virtue. Yet under the Lich's hand, it becomes proof of his philosophy, that all things, even the most meaningful, can collapse into nothing. For Finn, this is more than a tactical setback. It is an existential wound. The very text that confirmed his identity as a hero is twisted into the opposite of what it meant. The Lich does not simply steal the book, he hollows it, leaving Finn to question whether any symbol can endure. Thematically, this moment dramatises one of the Lich's most chilling strategies. He does not only destroy bodies, he destroys meanings. To him, corruption is more powerful than obliteration. Destruction erases, but corruption mocks. By corrupting the Encayridion, he proves his point without words. Nothing is sacred. He does not need to argue that heroism is fragile. He demonstrates it by hollowing its greatest artifact. Finn's journey through the Encayridion's corruption mirrors his broader coming of age. In his early quest, the book validated his optimism, assuring him that courage and kindness mattered. In its corruption, the book teaches him a harsher lesson, that symbols can fail, that ideals can be twisted, that heroes can fall. The loss of Billy, corrupted into the Lich's vessel, intensifies this lesson. Finn is forced to see that even his idol is not immune. For a time, it seems as if the Lich has won, not by defeating Finn physically, but by undermining the foundations of his belief. Yet this is where Finn's true resilience begins. By facing the Lich's corruption of the Encayridion, Finn learns that meaning cannot rest solely on symbols. Books, heroes, and artifacts can fail, but choice endures. The Lich wants Finn to believe that the collapse of the book proves the collapse of meaning itself. Finn refuses. He insists that meaning is not handed down from objects, but created in action. This shift is critical. Finn grows from a boy who relies on inherited ideals to a hero who creates his own. Philosophically, the Encayridion represents the tension between permanence and fragility. It was meant to be permanent, a text preserved across time to guide future heroes. The Lich proves its fragility, reducing it to a key, but Adventure Time ultimately reclaims it by showing that fragility is not futility. The book may fail, but the ideals it represented can still be lived. Meaning is not in the object, but in the choice to embody its values. The Encayridion's role in the multiverse arc further complicates its symbolism. Through the Lich's manipulation, the book opens portals to alternate realities. Farmworld is born, a version of Earth where the Mushroom War's outcome differed, and Finn grows into a hardened, isolated warrior. This alternate world demonstrates the stakes of the Lich's philosophy. In Farmworld, without the same bonds of community and resilience, Finn succumbs to despair. The Encayridion, twisted into a key, exposes not only Oo's fragility, but the fragility of existence itself. Yet even here, the counterpoint persists. Prismo, the wish-granting being who oversees the multiverse, embodies possibility. Against the Lich's inevitability, Prismo demonstrates that realities can branch, change, and multiply. The Encayridion becomes the site of this clash. Inevitability versus possibility, despair versus imagination. That the Lich uses the book to reach Prismo proves his ambition. He does not want to corrupt one world, but all worlds. Yet Prismo's very existence undermines him, showing that dreaming cannot be erased. The Encayridion is fragile, but imagination is persistent. Finn's confrontation with the Lich in this arc reveals how far he has grown since his first quest for the book. No longer does he see the Encayridion as the source of his heroism. When faced with its corruption, he no longer collapses into despair. Instead, he asserts his own philosophy, choosing action and resilience regardless of the book's fate. The Encayridion, once central, becomes secondary. What matters is not the artifact, but the choice to resist despair. The Encheiridion's dual role, guide and key, symbol of meaning and instrument of annihilation, perfectly captures the philosophical tension at the heart of Adventure Time. The Lich insists that fragility proves futility. The heroes insist that fragility demands resilience. The book, corrupted and reclaimed, embodies both sides of this argument. Its corruption demonstrates inevitability. Its reclamation demonstrates possibility. In this tension, the series explores one of life's deepest truths. that meaning is never permanent, always fragile, but always worth creating again. In the end, the Encheiridion's story is inseparable from the Lich's philosophy. He did not merely want the book, he wanted to hollow it, to prove that nothing sacred endures. Yet in doing so, he unintentionally strengthened Finn's resolve. By showing that symbols can fail, he forced Finn to discover that meaning is not in objects, but in choices. The book may be corrupted, but the act of resistance cannot. This is the irony of the Lich's legacy. In trying to erase meaning, he compels others to affirm it more fiercely. If the Encayridion represents the fragility of symbols, then Billy represents the fragility of ideals. Long before Finn, Billy was celebrated as the greatest hero in Oo. His battles against monsters were legendary, his courage unmatched, his story a beacon for those who wanted to believe that goodness could triumph over darkness. For Finn especially, Billy was not only a hero, but a role model, the very image of what he aspired to become. Yet when the Lich corrupts and possesses Billy, that ideal collapses. The moment is not only shocking narratively, but devastating philosophically. It is the Lich's clearest statement that even the brightest ideals can be hollowed into shells. Billy is introduced early in the series as a towering, almost mythical figure. Though older and worn down by years of conflict, he is still revered by the people of Oo. Finn idolizes him, eager to learn from his wisdom. When Billy tells Finn that heroism is about fighting for what's right, even when it is hard, the words resonate deeply. For Finn, who constantly struggles to define himself as more than a boy with a sword, Billy's approval is proof that his path matters. Billy embodies meaning, continuity, and hope. He is the living counterpart to the Encayridion, not just a text, but a person who inspires. This is what makes the Lich's corruption so cruel. In the Lich, Finn and Jake encounter Billy, seemingly guiding them toward their next great mission, to retrieve the Encayridion and use it to banish the Lich once and for all. Finn's trust is absolute. Why would he doubt the hero he idolizes? Yet, when the truth is revealed, and Billy's form is shown to be the Lich's disguise, the betrayal is catastrophic. The Lich did not simply deceive Finn. He hollowed out the very idea of heroism. Billy, the ideal of courage and goodness, becomes a mask for despair. Philosophically, this moment is central to the Lich's worldview. His philosophy is not that heroes never exist, but that their ideals cannot endure. By wearing Billy's form, he demonstrates that even the highest symbols of hope can be corrupted. It is a statement more powerful than words. Ideals are fragile, and despair will always find a way to hollow them. The Lich's calm voice, delivered through Billy's body, becomes not just a threat, but a mockery. He takes what Finn values most and turns it into evidence for inevitability. Finn's reaction reflects the weight of this betrayal. For the first time, his optimism is not enough. He is devastated, shaken, almost broken. To be deceived by an enemy is one thing. To be betrayed by an idol is another. This is the Lich's strategy at its most insidious. Despair not by brute force, but by corruption. He does not need to kill Finn's body. He only needs to wound his belief. By hollowing Billy, he tries to prove that heroism itself is meaningless. Yet, as with the Encayridion, the corruption of Billy ultimately backfires. Though Finn is shaken, he refuses to let Billy's legacy collapse. He learns that ideals cannot be preserved perfectly. They can be corrupted, betrayed, and lost. But their meaning can still endure in memory and action. Finn does not abandon Billy's lessons simply because the hero fell. Instead, he chooses to carry them forward, separating the man from the mask. The Lich may have hollowed Billy's body, but he could not erase the memory of his courage. This act of remembrance becomes Finn's defiance. The hollowing of Billy also illustrates the parasitic nature of the Lich. He creates nothing of his own. He only corrupts what exists. He did not build a new philosophy, but twisted an old one. He did not invent a symbol, but wore a hero-like clothing. This dependence reveals the weakness in his philosophy. If despair were truly inevitable, why would it need to corrupt at all? Why not erase? The fact that the Lich must parasitize meaning demonstrates that meaning has power. He cannot destroy it outright. He must twist it. In this way, his corruption paradoxically confirms that ideals matter. From a symbolic perspective, Billy's corruption is devastating because it collapses trust. Heroes serve as anchors for communities. When Billy is revealed as the Lich's disguise, it suggests that even the most trusted can be vessels of despair. This undermines the stability of community itself, not just Finn's faith. Yet responds by remembering Billy as he truly was, not as the mask the Lich wore. Communities resist despair by retelling stories, by refusing to let corruption have the final word. This communal remembrance ensures that Billy remains a hero, even in death. Billy's hollowing also mirrors the corruption of the Encayridion. Both are guides to heroism, one textual and one embodied. Both are twisted into tools of annihilation. And in both cases, Finn learns the same lesson, that symbols and idols are fragile, but meaning is not erased by their failure. Meaning is lived, not inherited. This lesson marks Finn's growth from boy to hero, from naive follower to independent resistor. In a broader philosophical sense, Billy's corruption demonstrates the Lich's obsession with inevitability. To him, the hollowing of ideals is proof that nothing endures, but the series suggests otherwise. Ideals endure not because they remain uncorrupted, but because they can be reclaimed. Heroes may fall, but their meaning can survive in memory, in choice, and in those who come after. The Lich proves fragility. Proves resilience. Even in the finale, the shadow of Billy's corruption lingers. When communities unite against Golb, they are in part resisting the same despair the Lich once preached. The memory of lost heroes strengthens their resolve. Finn's courage, shaped by his disillusionment, becomes the foundation for resilience. The Lich hollowed Billy, but in doing so, he forced others to affirm ideals more fiercely. His corruption sharpened the very hope he sought to erase. The irony of Billy's story is that the Lich, in trying to erase him, immortalized him. By corrupting him, he ensured that his fall would be remembered and retold, not as proof of despair, but as proof of resilience. Billy's true legacy is not that he was hollowed, but that his ideals survived corruption. He became a story, and stories cannot be possessed. In the end, Billy's hollowing is one of the clearest demonstrations of the Lich's philosophy and its failure. He proved that ideals are fragile, but he could not prove that they are meaningless. He hollowed the hero, but he could not silence the memory. The Lich's philosophy collapses here because it cannot account for resilience, the ability to reclaim, to remember, to rebuild. Billy fell, but rose. That is the paradox of the void. It can consume, but it cannot prevent life from answering. One of the most chilling aspects of the Lich is his voice. Unlike other villains in Adventure Time, who posture, rant or sing, the Lich speaks with eerie restraint. His words are deliberate, measured, and heavy with certainty. He does not argue so much as declare. Each phrase is less a persuasion than a pronouncement, as though he were merely stating a truth that others have yet to accept. To understand the Lich, is to listen to the weight of his language and to recognize that his philosophy is expressed as much in tone and silence as in content. From his earliest appearance in Mortal Folly, the Lich speech sets him apart. While Finn shouts, Jake jokes, and even Princess Bubblegum panics, the Lich remains calm. His first words to Finn, "Fool, you are alone, child. Strike not as insults but as facts." He does not say, "I will make you fall," but simply, "fall." To him, collapse is not a threat, but a law of existence. His language frames inevitability, not as something to be achieved, but as something already underway. This subtlety makes his voice more terrifying than a scream ever could. The delivery by Ron Perlman intensifies this effect. Deep, resonant, and slow, his voice gives the impression of ancient authority. He speaks as though he has been here long before anyone else and will remain long after. In a world of colourful exaggerations, his words carry the weight of finality. It is no wonder that his philosophy feels persuasive, not because he explains it in detail, but because his very manner of speaking conveys inevitability. The Lich sounds like entropy given voice. In the Lich episode, his use of language through Billy's body demonstrates his ability to hollow not only forms, but also voices. Billy was once the voice of heroism, guiding Finn with words of encouragement and wisdom. When the Lich speaks through him, the contrast is devastating. The very voice that once affirmed meaning now declares despair. This perversion of language reveals one of the Lich's central strategies. He turns words themselves against those who trust them. If the Encayridion can be corrupted as a text, Billy can be corrupted as a voice. Both demonstrate the fragility of meaning. Later, in the Comet, we hear the fullest expression of his philosophy. Here, reduced to a skeletal husk, the Lich no longer needs deception or disguise. He speaks directly to Finn, articulating his worldview with chilling clarity. Existence is a mistake, life is endless suffering, and non-existence is the only cure. These words strip away all pretense of villainy. He is not greedy for power or revenge. He is simply articulating what he believes to be the truth. To him, annihilation is not conquest, but mercy. His philosophy is not hatred, but resignation. A twisted compassion that says, if life is pain, the kindest act is to end it. This speech crystallizes why the Lich is so frightening. He is not irrational. His words make a certain bleak sense. They resonate because they echo thoughts many people have in moments of despair. Is life worth it? Is existence itself an error? Would silence be easier? By voicing these questions with authority, the Lich becomes more than a villain. He becomes the embodiment of existential doubt. Yet it is precisely here that Adventure Time stages its deepest philosophical confrontation. Finn, having endured loss, betrayal, and disappointment, refuses to accept the Lich's words. He does not argue with elaborate logic. Instead, he responds with action and conviction. His refusal to believe that existence is a mistake is not naive, but chosen. He has seen pain, but he insists that meaning is possible. His answer is lived, not spoken. To keep fighting, to keep caring, to keep affirming. Against the Lich's words of despair, Finn offers the language of resilience. The contrast between the two is stark. The Lich uses few words, each one heavy with finality. Finn uses many words, often clumsy or brash, but full of energy. Where the Lich declares, Finn questions, jokes, and insists. Their dialogue is not just verbal, but philosophical. Silence versus chatter. finality versus openness, despair versus possibility. Adventure Time suggests that meaning is not found in perfect language, but in the willingness to keep speaking at all. This is also why the series often surrounds the Lich with silence. When he speaks, music fades, and characters stop talking. The quiet amplifies his words, making them seem absolute. But silence is his domain. When others respond, through speech, song, or noise, they reclaim the space. This dynamic becomes especially important in the finale, when U resists Golb's silence with communal music. The principle is the same. Despair thrives in silence, but resilience thrives in voices. The Encheiridion's role as a text ties directly into this theme of language. As a book, it represents the attempt to fix meaning into words and pass it on. The Lich's corruption of it demonstrates his belief that language cannot preserve meaning, that words are as fragile as bodies. By turning the Encayridion into a key for annihilation, he suggests that even the best-intentioned words can be twisted. Yet Finn's response shows that language is not the final arbiter of meaning. Action, Island. Words can fail, but choice can reclaim them. Billy's corruption reinforces this point. His words, once full of inspiration, are hollowed into despair, but Finn chooses to remember the real Billy, not the mask. In doing so, he reclaims the voice from corruption. This act shows that language can be twisted, but memory and choice can restore it. The Lich's philosophy insists that words collapse into silence. U replies that silence can be resisted by remembering, retelling, and reusing language in new ways. Symbolically, the Lich's language is tied to death itself. Death does not argue, it declares. It does not ask, it announces. The Lich speaks like death, making his words feel less like opinions than inevitabilities. Yet life replies differently. Life argues, resists, jokes, stumbles, and sings. This clash of styles, declaration versus conversation, embodies the philosophical heart of the series. Despair speaks as if nothing can be said. Hope speaks precisely because something must be said. The Lich's philosophy in words is terrifying because it feels so final. But Adventure Time shows that finality is never the end. Words can be reclaimed, silence can be broken, and even despair can be reinterpreted. The Lich speaks inevitability, but U responds with possibility. His voice may be chilling, but it is not absolute. Every song, every laugh, every clumsy word from Finn is proof that language resists silence. In the end, the Lich's words define him as much as his skeletal form. He is the voice of inevitability, the calm declaration that all ends in nothing. But his legacy is not his philosophy. It is the resistance he provokes. By declaring silence, he compels others to sing. By pronouncing despair, he inspires resilience. His philosophy in words is therefore both a threat and a gift, a reminder that language can falter, but meaning endures when people choose to keep speaking. By the time the Lich manipulates Finn and Jake into retrieving the Encayridion, his philosophy of inevitability is already clear. He insists that collapse is not a matter of if, but when, and his actions throughout the series serve as demonstrations of this claim. The Encayridion, first introduced as a guide to heroism, becomes the perfect object for him to twist into proof of his worldview. What better way to show the fragility of meaning than to hollow out the very book meant to preserve it? The Encayridion's symbolic weight cannot be overstated. For Finn, it was the artifact that validated his heroism. Passing its trials gave him confidence that he belonged among the great defenders of U. The book is more than a collection of instructions. It is the embodiment of continuity, wisdom preserved across generations. To hold it is to feel connected to those who came before, to believe that ideals endure beyond individual lives. It represents permanence in a world of constant change. But when the Lich seizes it, the Encayridion becomes a key to destruction. By combining it with the jewels of power taken from U's rulers, he opens a portal to the multiverse, aiming not simply to dominate U, but to erase all existence. The transition of the book from guide to weapon dramatizes the Lich's philosophy. Nothing is incorruptible. What one generation treasures, another can pervert. What one hero sees as sacred despair can twist into a tool of negation. The inevitability of corruption is central to the Lich's worldview. He does not need to shatter the Encheiridion's pages. He only needs to show that its meaning is fragile. In his hands, the book's noble ideals collapse into nothing more than a mechanism. This demonstrates his claim that all symbols are temporary, that even the most cherished artifacts are vulnerable to redefinition. By hollowing out the Encayridion, he enacts his philosophy without needing to speak it. Finn's devastation in the Lich reflects how personal this corruption feels. The boy who once celebrated the book as proof of his worth now sees it used as evidence against meaning itself. Worse, the Lich achieves this by wearing Billy's form, using Finn's trust as a weapon. In this moment, Finn is not just tricked, he is philosophically tested. The ideals that defined his identity are turned inside out, leaving him to wonder whether meaning itself is an illusion. Yet this is also the moment where Finn's resilience begins to crystallize. Though shaken, he refuses to surrender to inevitability. His confrontation with the Lich in the multiverse arc demonstrates a deeper maturity. He learns that meaning cannot rest on artifacts. Books, idols, and symbols can all be corrupted. What endures is the choice to keep affirming life even after those symbols fail. This realization marks Finn's shift from naive optimism to deliberate resilience. The multiverse journey emphasizes this philosophical conflict. Farmworld, created as a result of Finn's wish to Prismo, shows what happens when meaning collapses. In this alternate timeline, Finn becomes a hardened, isolated figure, living in a world where despair has the upper hand. This farmworld version of Finn embodies the Lich's philosophy that collapse is inevitable and that resistance is futile. By confronting this reality, Finn learns the stakes of surrendering to despair. The Encayridion, twisted into a key, becomes the doorway into this confrontation. Prismo's presence in this arc complicates the story further. As a being of imagination and possibility, Prismo represents the opposite of inevitability. He demonstrates that realities branch, that choices multiply, that no single path is fixed. The Lich's use of the Encayridion to reach Prismo reflects his ambition to end not just one world, but all possibilities. He wants to silence the dreamer himself, to reduce imagination to nothing. The fact that he reaches Prismo at all shows his terrifying scope. Yet Prismo's very existence resists him. Dreaming cannot be erased, only interrupted. The Encayridion's corruption, then, becomes a stage for the clash between inevitability and possibility. Philosophically, the Lich's use of the Encayridion underscores his parasitic nature. He creates nothing, he only corrupts. He does not write his own book, but hollows out one already filled with meaning. This reveals the weakness of his philosophy. If despair were truly inevitable, it would not need to borrow the forms of meaning. It would stand alone. The fact that the Lich must parasitize symbols suggests that meaning has power of its own, enough to demand corruption rather than annihilation. Finn's eventual resistance demonstrates that inevitability is not the final word. The Encayridion may be corrupted, but Finn reclaims its meaning through action. He proves that resilience does not require perfect symbols. Even when ideals collapse, they can be rebuilt. His refusal to accept the Lich's philosophy shows that inevitability is only half the story. Fragility is real, but so is renewal. The Encayridion's dual role, guide and key, becomes the perfect metaphor for this tension. It demonstrates fragility, but also the possibility of reclamation. Symbolically, the Lich's corruption of the Encayridion also reflects the collapse of inherited wisdom. Books are humanity's attempt to preserve knowledge against time. By twisting the Encayridion, the Lich mocks this attempt, suggesting that nothing survives the void, yet the series insists otherwise. Even after the book's corruption, Finn carries forward the lessons he once learned. The text may falter, but memory and choice endure. This reclamation proves that inevitability does not erase meaning. It challenges people to create it anew. The finale reinforces this truth on a larger scale. Golb, the ultimate embodiment of entropy, threatens to dissolve all of U, yet communities resist through song, memory, and unity. Their resistance proves that even in the face of inevitability, meaning can be remade. The Encayridion story foreshadows this finale. The void can twist symbols, but it cannot erase resilience. Inevitability is real, but it is not absolute. In the end, the Encayridion's corruption by the Lich dramatizes the core philosophical tension of Adventure Time. Despair insists that all collapses into silence. Hope replies that fragility does not erase meaning, but demands resilience. The book's duality, from heroic guide to annihilating key, captures both sides of this argument. The Lich proved that inevitability haunts every symbol. Finn proved that resilience can reclaim even the hollowed. The Encayridion, like U itself, becomes not a monument to permanence, but a testament to renewal. What makes the Lich so frightening is not just what he does, but what he represents about evil itself. Most villains in Adventure Time embody some exaggerated trait: greed, chaos, hunger, pride. They are dangerous, yes, but they are also familiar. Their flaws reflect human failings, scaled up into magical caricatures. The Lich is different. He is not simply selfish or violent. He is the embodiment of negation itself, a force that insists all existence is meaningless. To understand him is to confront the series' meditation on the nature of evil. The Lich's evil is not the kind born of desire. He does not crave wealth like Magic Man, nor domination like the Ice King once sought, nor even the chaotic fun of Hunson Abadir. He craves nothing, and that is precisely the point. His philosophy is that nothingness is the only truth. He does not destroy because he enjoys destruction. He destroys because he believes annihilation is inevitable, and he wishes only to hasten it. This makes him less like a tyrant and more like a prophet of despair. His evil is not personal, but metaphysical. The Encayridion plays a key role in framing this distinction. When Finn first wins the book, it is positioned as the artifact of virtue, the guide that separates good from evil, courage from cowardice. The Lich's manipulation of it demonstrates that evil is not always obvious. By twisting a symbol of good into a tool of negation, he reveals that evil can wear the form of good. Billy, too, is corrupted in this way. Evil here is not an opposing force with clear boundaries. It is a hollowing, a draining of meaning from what was once sacred. This corruption defines the Lich's philosophy of evil. Unlike other villains, the Lich is not distracted by secondary motives. He does not want a kingdom, nor does he waste time gloating. His words are sparse, his movements direct, his strategy minimal. This focus reflects his philosophy. Evil, to him, is not about indulgence, but inevitability. While other villains betray their goals with flaws, vanity, laziness, or temper, the Lich betrays nothing. He is unwavering, and this is why he feels unstoppable. He is not motivated by weakness. He is motivated by certainty. This raises a profound question. Is the Lich evil in the same way as other villains, or is he something else entirely? Adventure Time seems to suggest that he is not evil in the conventional sense, but rather the embodiment of entropy itself. His skeletal form, his voice, his corruption of the Encayridion, all suggest that he is closer to a law of nature than a personality. He is evil not because he chooses wickedness, but because he embodies the principle of negation. He is entropy given will. Yet the series complicates this by giving him voice and intent. Unlike Golb, who simply dissolves without explanation, the Lich speaks. He articulates his philosophy, giving despair the veneer of reason. This articulation makes him a villain in the narrative sense, but it also makes him more unsettling. If Golb is chaos without personality, the Lich is despair made personal. He takes an abstract law of the universe, that all things decay, and insists on accelerating it. He makes the impersonal personal, and in doing so, he becomes the embodiment of evil as choice. Finn's confrontations with the Lich reveal why this distinction matters. If the Lich were only a law of nature, resistance would be futile. But because he is personified, he can be resisted. His corruption of the Encayridion, his possession of Billy, his speeches in the Comet, all of these can be opposed, contradicted, and ultimately undermined. This is the philosophical genius of the series. It takes entropy, an undeniable reality, and personifies it so that characters can stand against it. The Lich is evil not because he invents despair, but because he chooses to side with it. The corruption of Billy demonstrates this clearly. Evil, for the Lich, is not simply violence, it is the erasure of meaning. By wearing Billy's form, he proves that ideals can be hollowed. This act is far more devastating than killing Billy would have been. Murder erases a life, corruption erases meaning. The Lich's evil is thus not about destruction, but about annihilation of value. He seeks not only to end bodies, but to prove that hope itself is futile. This philosophical conception of evil makes the Lich unique in U. Most villains can be redeemed, or at least understood. Marceline's father loves her in his own chaotic way. Ice King's cruelty stems from the madness of the crown. Even Magic Man, in his chaos, is a tragic figure of grief. The Lich alone offers no redeeming backstory, no sympathetic motive. His origin in the Mushroom War only reinforces this. He is not a person twisted by pain, but a force born from destruction itself. His evil is pure negation, stripped of complexity. And yet, the series does not let him stand unchallenged. Sweet Pea, his rebirth, complicates the idea that negation is absolute. If the Lich were only entropy given will, then his rebirth as an innocent child should be impossible. Yet it happens. This demonstrates that evil, while powerful, is not absolute. Even the embodiment of negation can be transformed. Sweet Pea is proof that evil, personified, can be undone, reinterpreted, and redefined. The nature of evil, then, is not inevitability, but possibility. The Encayridion once again frames this tension. As a corrupted text, it proves that symbols of good can become tools of evil. But as a remembered story, it proves that corruption is not final. Finn continues to embody its lessons long after the Lich twists it. This duality mirrors the larger truth of the series. Evil is real, but it is not final. Meaning can be hollowed, but it can also be reclaimed. The finale reinforces this understanding. GOLB, as the embodiment of pure chaos, seems more terrifying than the Lich. But U resists, not through destruction of Golb, but through community, song, and memory. Evil, in this final sense, is not something to be eradicated, but something to be resisted and redefined. The Lich's philosophy, that annihilation is inevitable, is proven false by the continuation of U, fragile but enduring. Philosophically, the Lich embodies the darkest possible view of evil, that it is absolute, inevitable, and final. But Adventure Time insists on the opposite, that evil is parasitic, fragile, and ultimately transformable. The Lich is terrifying because he feels inevitable. He is defeated because the series proves inevitability is not the same as absoluteness. His evil is real, but it is not the final word. In the end, the Lich teaches us what evil truly is in the world of Adventure Time. It is not greed, chaos, or cruelty. It is the hollowing of meaning, the declaration that nothing matters. And his defeat teaches the counterpoint. That meaning is fragile, yes, but not futile. Evil cannot be ignored, but it can be resisted, reclaimed, and even transformed. The Lich, in embodying evil, ensures that U learns how to resist it. That is his paradoxical role, to embody despair so that resilience can be born. The Lich is terrifying, not because he is loud or explosive, but because he is quiet. His philosophy is built on silence, the conviction that when all things end, what remains is not transformation, not legacy, not renewal, but nothing. In a world of candy colours, eccentric kingdoms, and endless chatter, the Lich represents stillness, the end of sound. To explore his philosophy fully, we must consider how Adventure Time frames death and silence, and how the Lich attempts to define both. Death in U is rarely treated as final. Across the series, characters die and return, reincarnations occur, and ghosts persist. Finn and Jake encounter the Dead Worlds, where existence continues in strange forms. Even death is playful, populated by death gods and afterlives that suggest continuation rather than conclusion. Against this backdrop, the Lich is anomalous. He does not promise an afterlife or transformation. He promises nothingness. To him, death is not a door, but a void. His presence reframes death from quirky inevitability to absolute negation. The silence that follows him reinforces this view. Scenes with the Lich often quiet the world around him. Music fades, dialogue halts, and even the background noise diminishes. This absence of sound is not accidental. It symbolizes his philosophy. For the Lich, the end is not dramatic but still. He does not revel in chaos like Magic Man or Hunson Abadir. He does not create spectacle. He embodies the opposite: stillness, inevitability, silence. His philosophy insists that everything ends not with a bang, but with nothing. The Encayridion plays into this framing of death and silence. As a heroic text, it is filled with words, trials, instructions, guidance. It is language attempting to preserve meaning across generations. By corrupting it into a key for annihilation, the Lich strips it of its words. He reduces a book, the very symbol of language and continuity, into silence. In doing so, he makes the Encayridion an extension of his philosophy. Words, like lives, collapse into void. The Dead Worlds themselves, glimpsed in episodes like Death in Bloom and The Dark Cloud, also stand in contrast to the Lich's worldview. They show that even death has structure, rulers, and continuity. Souls persist, however oddly, and even the Grim Reaper himself is a character with quirks. The Lich, however, rejects this structure. He does not want souls to persist, nor rulers to govern. He wants silence so complete that not even afterlife exists. His vision of death is more radical than anything U has imagined. It is the end not only of bodies, but of existence itself. This radical silence is clearest in the Comet. When Finn encounters the skeletal husk of the Lich, the villain explains his philosophy directly. Existence is a mistake. Life is endless suffering, and non-existence is the cure. This is the Lich's clearest articulation of death as silence. To him, continuation, whether in afterlife, reincarnation, or memory, is pointless. The only true release is erasure. His calm delivery emphasizes that this is not a rant, but a certainty. Silence is not just preferable, it is inevitable. Yet Adventure Time refuses to let this silence win. Again and again, the series stages acts of noise, language, and community as resistance. When the Candy Kingdom rallies, they sing. When Marceline comforts Simon, she uses music. When Finn defies despair, he shouts, jokes, and argues. The finale, with its climactic song against Golb, is the ultimate act of resistance. Voices layered together, refusing to be erased. Silence is the Lich's philosophy. Noise is U's response. This tension reveals a deep philosophical truth. Silence is real, endings do happen, lives do end, voices do fade. But silence is never absolute as long as memory and community persist. The Lich insists that death erases meaning. Adventure Time insists that meaning persists precisely because of fragility. We sing because silence looms. We tell stories because time passes. We love because loss is inevitable. The void threatens, but it also gives urgency to our voices. The transformation of the Lich into Sweet Pea reframes this philosophy of death and silence. Instead of erasure, the void is given new life. Sweet Pea is noisy, curious, and full of potential. His very existence proves that silence is not final. Even annihilation can be folded back into life. This transformation demonstrates that death is not only an end, but also a beginning. Not only silence, but also the prelude to new voices. The Lich's insistence on void is contradicted by his own rebirth. The Encayridion too is reclaimed. Though corrupted into a key for annihilation, its memory as a heroic text persists in Finn's identity. He continues to embody its lessons even when the book itself is lost. This reclaiming of language from silence demonstrates that words, like lives, can endure in memory. The Lich may hollow texts and voices, but he cannot erase their echoes. In this way, silence is resisted not only by sound, but by remembrance. Symbolically, the Lich's philosophy of death and silence also frames him as a challenge rather than a conclusion. He insists that death is nothingness, but the series shows death as transformation, continuation, and memory. He insists that silence is inevitable, but the series answers with noise. His philosophy exists to be contradicted, to force others to assert meaning more strongly. Without his silence, the voices of U would not need to shout so loudly. In the finale, this theme reaches its height. Golb embodies silence, more absolute than the Lich ever did. Yet U resists with music, proving that silence, no matter how overwhelming, can be broken. This is the ultimate refutation of the Lich's philosophy. Death may come, silence may loom, but as long as even one voice sings, annihilation is not complete. The end is never the end. In the end, the Lich's legacy lies in his articulation of death and silence. He forces us to confront the possibility that endings are absolute, that nothing persists. But Adventure Time replies that endings can be beginnings, that silence can be broken, that death can be transformed into story. The Lich speaks inevitability, but Oo sings resilience. His silence is haunting, but it is not final. The Lich is not content to threaten only Oo. His ambition is larger, stretching into the fabric of reality itself. Through the Encayridion and the Jewels of Power, he seeks to pierce the boundaries of universes, proving that his philosophy of annihilation is not local but cosmic. These stories, spanning the Lich, Finn the human, and Jake the dog, situate him within the multiverse and reveal how his worldview scales from the personal to the infinite. To understand the Lich fully, we must follow him beyond Oo and into the branching possibilities of existence itself. When Finn and Jake are tricked into retrieving the Encayridion, they believe they are completing a mission for Billy. The truth, of course, is that Billy has been hollowed and worn by the Lich. The Jewels of Power, taken from Oo's rulers, and the Encayridion together form a key, not just to destruction, but to the multiverse itself. With these tools, the Lich does not simply seek to conquer Oo. He seeks to erase existence across every possible branch of reality. His philosophy of inevitability, once aimed at a single world, expands into a universal claim. All realities collapse, not just this one. The symbolism of the Encayridion is central here. What began as a heroic guidebook becomes the gateway to annihilation on a cosmic scale. The Lich does not write his own book. He twists one already sacred. This mirrors his larger strategy. He creates nothing, only corrupts. By using the Encayridion as a key, he makes his philosophy visible, meaning itself can be hollowed, and continuity across worlds can be undone. The book, once a promise of permanence, becomes the proof of fragility. When the Lich enters the time room and confronts Prismo, the clash of philosophies becomes cosmic. Prismo is a being of imagination, a wish-granter who dreams realities into existence. His very nature contradicts inevitability. He represents possibility, multiplicity, and the branching of outcomes. The Lich, by contrast, seeks to prune all branches into silence. This confrontation is less a battle than a metaphysical dialogue. The dreamer meets the annihilator. The fact that the Lich reaches Prismo at all demonstrates the terrifying reach of his philosophy. He does not want to silence one voice. He wants to silence dreaming itself. The creation of Farmworld demonstrates what happens when despair intersects with possibility. Finn, deceived by the Lich's manipulation of the Encayridion, wishes for a world where the Mushroom War never happened. The result is an alternate timeline in which humanity survived, but at a terrible cost. Farmworld Finn grows into a hardened, isolated figure, scarred by violence and lacking the playful bonds of Oo. This alternate Finn embodies the Lich's philosophy in miniature. Life reduced to struggle, meaning eroded by despair. The Farmworld arc demonstrates how easily possibility can slip into inevitability if hope is absent. Yet the Multiverse arc also demonstrates the resilience of imagination. Prismo's existence, his endless capacity to generate alternate realities, undermines the Lich's philosophy. Even when Farmworld collapses into despair, the very act of imagining alternate outcomes proves that inevitability is not absolute. The Lich insists that all paths end in silence. Prismo demonstrates that paths multiply endlessly. possibility itself resists annihilation. Finn's journey through this arc reflects his maturation. He learns that despair can corrupt not only symbols like the Encayridion, but entire worlds. Yet he also learns that resilience requires choice, not certainty. He cannot control the multiverse, nor guarantee outcomes, but he can resist despair in his own actions. By the end of this arc, Finn understands that meaning is not handed down by books or idols or even universes. Meaning is lived in choice. This realization strengthens him for his later confrontations with the Lich and Golb. Philosophically, the Lich in the multiverse reveals the scale of his worldview. He is not a tyrant seeking power in Oo, but a prophet of annihilation seeking silence everywhere. His corruption of Billy, his use of the Encayridion, his confrontation with Prismo, all of these reveal that despair is not local but universal. Yet the response is equally cosmic. Imagination, possibility, and resilience are not confined to Oo either. They are woven into the structure of reality. For every declaration of inevitability, there is a dream of possibility. The multiverse also reframes the Lich's uniqueness. He often appears as the ultimate evil in Oo, but in the context of the multiverse, he is one voice among many forces. Golb represents chaos more absolute than the Lich. Prismo represents imagination. The Catalyst Comet represents renewal. Against these forces, the Lich appears not as inevitability itself, but as one interpretation of existence. His philosophy, though terrifying, is partial. The multiverse proves that no single worldview is final. Farmworld's resolution drives this point home. Though it begins as a world corrupted by the Lich's manipulation, it does not remain defined by despair. Alternate Finn makes choices that complicate inevitability. Even in a world scarred by violence, possibility persists. This outcome undermines the Lich's claim to universality. He can manipulate, corrupt, and twist, but he cannot eliminate possibility. Even when he reaches into alternate realities, his philosophy fails to claim them fully. The Encheiridion's role in this arc is crucial. As the book that first validated Finn's heroism, its corruption into a multiverse key is devastating. But in the end, its legacy is not destruction. Finn's resilience, sharpened by betrayal, ensures that the book's meaning is reclaimed. The Encayridion proves both fragility and possibility. Fragile enough to be corrupted, possible enough to inspire resistance. In this way, it becomes a microcosm of the entire multiverse arc. Ultimately, the Lich in the multiverse shows the limits of his philosophy. He insists that all realities end in silence, but the multiverse demonstrates that realities proliferate. He claims that inevitability defines existence, but imagination proves otherwise. His ambition expands beyond Oo, but so does the resistance against him. By entering the multiverse, the Lich reveals not his absoluteness, but his limitations. In the end, his role in the multiverse arc is paradoxical. He expands his reach, but in doing so, he exposes the boundaries of his philosophy. Against Prismo, the dreamer, he cannot win. Against Finn, who chooses resilience, he cannot prevail. Against the multiverse itself, he cannot impose silence. The Encayridion, his tool of corruption, becomes instead the stage for his undoing. The book meant to erase meaning ends up sharpening it. The Lich declares inevitability. The multiverse replies with imagination. The Lich's philosophy reaches its purest articulation in the Comet. By this point, Finn has faced betrayal, multiversal collapse, and the corruption of the Encayridion. He has matured from an excitable boy into a thoughtful young man, ready to confront despair not only with his sword, but with his heart and mind. The arrival of the Catalyst Comet, a cosmic event tied to cycles of renewal, becomes the backdrop for his confrontation with the Lich's skeletal husk. In this encounter, the tension between annihilation and renewal, between silence and possibility, comes into sharp focus. The Catalyst Comet represents change, rebirth, and the strange continuity of existence. In the lore of Adventure Time, comets have struck Earth repeatedly, each time introducing new forces and shaping the course of history. Finn himself is linked to one of these comets, suggesting that his life is part of a larger cosmic cycle. The comet does not signify an ending, but a beginning, a disruption that sparks transformation. Against this symbol of renewal, the Lich positions himself as its opposite, the end that erases, the silence that forbids new beginnings. When Finn encounters the Lich in this context, the villain has been reduced to a skeletal husk. Stripped of grandeur, he sits calmly, almost serenely, and explains his philosophy. He tells Finn that existence is a mistake, that life is endless suffering, and that non-existence is the only cure. This speech is chilling, precisely because it is not dramatic. The Lich does not shout or rage. He speaks with quiet conviction, as if he were stating a simple fact. His presence beside the comet frames annihilation as an alternative to renewal. Where the comet offers transformation, the Lich offers silence. The contrast could not be clearer. The Catalyst Comet says, "Life is fragile, but it continues in cycles." The Lich says, "Life is fragile, and therefore it should end." Both acknowledge fragility, but they interpret it differently. The comet interprets fragility as reason for renewal. The Lich interprets fragility as proof of futility. This distinction crystallizes the heart of his philosophy. He is not wrong about fragility, everything does end, but he is wrong about what that ending means. Finn's response reflects his growth. Earlier in the series, he might have tried to argue with optimism, insisting that life is fun or that being a hero is enough. Now, having experienced betrayal and loss, he understands the depth of the Lich's claim, and yet he refuses it. His response is not an elaborate counter-argument, but a lived conviction. He chooses life, even knowing its fragility. By standing against the Lich at the comet, Finn affirms that fragility does not erase meaning. Instead, it makes meaning more urgent. The Encheiridion's legacy lingers in this encounter as well. Though the book itself is gone, its symbolic collapse still shapes the confrontation. The Lich once used the Encayridion to prove that symbols fail, that ideals are hollow. Finn has absorbed this lesson, and it strengthens him now. He no longer relies on external validation, not on books, idols, or artifacts. He understands that meaning is created in action, not preserved in objects. This realization allows him to resist the Lich without needing the Encayridion's guidance. He has internalized resilience. The Catalyst Comet also reframes the Lich's inevitability. For all his claims of finality, he cannot stop the comet's cycle. Renewal arrives regardless of his philosophy. This undermines his sense of absoluteness. He can argue that life is meaningless, but he cannot prevent new life from emerging. The comet is proof that existence, for all its fragility, persists. The Lich sits beside renewal, but cannot erase it. His presence becomes almost pathetic, a husk whispering inevitability, while the universe continues to move forward. This moment is significant because it shows the limits of despair. The Lich's philosophy is persuasive when spoken in darkness, when corruption and silence dominate. But beside the comet, his words seem smaller. Against the grandeur of renewal, annihilation feels less inevitable, and more like one voice among many. The universe itself resists him, not through battle, but through cycles of continuity. His philosophy, once absolute, is revealed to be partial. Finn's victory here is not physical, but philosophical. He does not slay the Lich in combat. He resists him by refusing to believe his words, by choosing renewal over silence. The Catalyst Comet empowers this choice, offering Finn a broader perspective on his place in the universe. He sees himself not as a lone hero, but as part of a cycle connected to forces larger than himself. Against inevitability, he discovers continuity. Against despair, he discovers belonging. Thematically, this encounter is one of the series' most profound. It stages the confrontation between two interpretations of fragility, futility versus resilience. The Lich insists that fragility makes life meaningless. The Comet insists that fragility makes life precious. Finn's choice of renewal over silence affirms the series' central philosophy, that meaning is not permanent but created again and again in cycles. Fragility is not the end, it is the reason to continue. Symbolically, the comet also echoes the Encayridion. Both are objects that connect individuals to something larger, one to heroism, the other to cosmic cycles. Both can be misunderstood or misused. But where the Encayridion was corrupted into a key for annihilation, the comet resists corruption. It arrives as it always does, unshaken by despair. This constancy emphasizes that renewal, unlike symbols or idols, is woven into the structure of existence itself. The Lich may twist books and heroes, but he cannot twist the universe's cycles. The rebirth of the Lich into Sweet Pea further complicates this philosophy of renewal. Instead of erasure, the Lich is transformed into innocence. His husk, so confident in silence, is contradicted by his own rebirth. Sweet Pea is noisy, curious, and alive. The cycle of renewal does not merely continue around the Lich, it redefines him. His transformation demonstrates that even despair can be folded back into possibility. Renewal is not only external, but internal, capable of reshaping even annihilation itself. In this sense, the Catalyst Comet encounter is the turning point in the Lich's story. It reveals that inevitability is not absolute, that renewal is stronger than silence, and that even the embodiment of despair can be transformed. The Lich's philosophy, once so persuasive, collapses beside the comet's simple truth: life continues. The finale echoes this lesson on a communal scale. When U resists Golb, it does so not with individual heroics, but with collective song. The act of community mirrors the comet's cycles, fragile, yes, but persistent. The Lich's philosophy of inevitability cannot withstand this resilience. His words fade into silence, while U's voices continue. In the end, the Catalyst Comet stages the philosophical climax of the Lich's character. He insists on silence, the comet insists on renewal. He declares futility, Finn declares resilience. The result is not the annihilation of despair, but its transformation. The Lich becomes Sweet Pea, a child whose very existence contradicts inevitability. The comet passes, the cycle continues, and the philosophy of the Lich is revealed not as absolute truth, but as one voice among many, a whisper drowned out by the song of renewal. The story of the Lich takes a radical turn in the comet when he is reborn as Sweet Pea. What was once a skeletal husk whispering about annihilation becomes a large, green-skinned infant with the voice of innocence. For a character defined by inevitability and silence, this transformation is staggering. It is not simply a narrative twist, but a philosophical statement. If the Lich embodied despair, then Sweet Pea embodies possibility. The shift reframes everything we thought was inevitable and forces us to reconsider what evil really means. When Finn defeats the Lich beside the Catalyst Comet, the husk of despair dissolves. But instead of being erased, the Lich's essence is reincarnated into a baby. This outcome is surprising because it contradicts the villain's own philosophy. The Lich insisted that existence is a mistake, that all ends in silence. Yet his end is not silence, but new life. Sweet Pea's birth undermines the claim that annihilation is inevitable. Even despair, it turns out, can be transformed. Sweet Pea's innocence is central to this contradiction. As a baby, he is incapable of articulating despair. He cries, he laughs, he babbles. He is noisy where the Lich was silent, vulnerable where the Lich was absolute. His very presence embodies the fragility that the Lich despised. And yet, in his fragility, Sweet Pea represents resilience. He is proof that even the most terrifying embodiment of despair can be folded into the cycle of renewal. This transformation also echoes the Encayridion. Just as the book was corrupted into a key for annihilation, but later reclaimed in memory, the Lich is hollowed into despair and then reimagined as a child. Both demonstrate that meaning is not permanent but fluid, capable of being twisted and reclaimed. The Encayridion proved that corruption is not final. Sweet Pea proves that despair is not either. Thematically, Sweet Pea reframes the nature of evil in Ooh. If the Lich represented pure negation, then Sweet Pea represents the possibility that evil is not absolute. He complicates the binary of good and evil, showing that even the embodiment of annihilation can be redefined. This does not erase the threat. Whispers of the Lich's essence still linger in Sweet Pea's story, but it transforms the conversation. Evil is not only to be fought, it can also be healed, reshaped, even reborn. Episodes focusing on Sweet Pea emphasize this tension. In the Sweet Pea episode, we see him as a child trying to live an ordinary life, yet the shadow of the Lich lingers. A mysterious figure recognizes his true nature and tempts him to embrace despair. Sweet Pea's struggle here is philosophical. Will he accept the inevitability of the void, or will he assert his own identity? His choice to declare himself not as the Lich, but as Sweet Pea, is a powerful statement. It proves that even with darkness inside him, he can choose life. This moment is crucial because it dramatizes the ongoing nature of resistance. The Lich was not destroyed, he was transformed, but the possibility of despair remains, embodied in Sweet Pea's potential. His declaration of identity shows that resistance is never final. It must be chosen again and again. Sweet Pea's very existence proves that despair can be resisted, but his struggle demonstrates that the temptation never fully vanishes. This is consistent with the larger philosophy of Adventure Time. Meaning is not permanent, but must be remade daily. Symbolically, Sweet Pea also represents hope for the future of Ooh. He is a child, a new generation born from the wreckage of despair. Where the Lich sought to erase continuity, Sweet Pea ensures it. His life with Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig situates him in a family surrounded by love and community. This environment contrasts sharply with the void he once embodied. It shows that the antidote to despair is not grand heroics, but ordinary love. By raising the embodiment of the Lich with care, Ooh transforms inevitability into possibility. This transformation also redefines Finn's role. By resisting the Lich and allowing his rebirth, Finn ensures that despair is not final. he does not destroy the void, he shepherds it into renewal. This act reflects Finn's growth from boy to hero. Early in the series, he might have believed that defeating evil meant annihilating it. But by the time of the comet, he understands that victory is not always destruction. Sometimes it is transformation. Sweet Pea's existence proves that even despair can be given new life. The Encheiridion's symbolic collapse prepares Finn for this understanding. When the book was corrupted, he learned that meaning cannot be preserved perfectly. Now, when the Lich is reborn, he learns that despair cannot be eradicated perfectly either. Both lessons teach him the same truth. Meaning is fragile, despair is persistent, but resilience is possible. Symbols can be hollowed, villains can return, but each time, renewal can reshape them. Sweet Pea's presence in the finale cements this philosophy. While the battle with Golb rages, Sweet Pea is not at the centre, yet his survival into the epilogue shows that life continues. The embodiment of despair lives on, but not as the Lich. He plays, grows, and lives as a child of Oo. His presence is a quiet reminder that the void is never entirely gone, but it can be transformed. Renewal is not an abstract idea, but a lived reality. Philosophically, the transformation of the Lich into Sweet Pea reveals the deepest counter-argument to inevitability. If even despair itself can be reborn as innocence, then nothing is absolute. Fragility is real, corruption is possible, but so is renewal. The Lich's philosophy collapses not because he is destroyed, but because he is changed. He cannot insist on silence when his own essence babbles and laughs. His defeat is not death, but transformation. Thematically, this is one of Adventure Time's boldest statements. Most stories treat evil as something to be vanquished. Here, evil is reimagined. The Lich is not slain, but given a new form. This choice refuses the simplicity of annihilation and embraces the complexity of transformation. It affirms that despair, no matter how persuasive, is not final. It can be resisted, reclaimed, and even reborn into something new. In the end, Sweet Pea represents the possibility that despair is never absolute. He embodies the fragile, noisy, and hopeful continuation of life in a world that once trembled before silence. The Encayridion may have collapsed, Billy may have been hollowed, and Oo may face endless threats, but as long as children like Sweet Pea exist, renewal is always possible. The Lich's transformation proves the failure of his philosophy. Annihilation was his creed, and yet he lives on as life itself. The rebirth of the Lich into Sweet Pea is one of the boldest choices Adventure Time ever made. Instead of erasing the embodiment of despair, the series transformed him into an innocent child, symbolizing the possibility of renewal even in the darkest corners of existence. Yet Sweet Pea's story does not end with his birth in the comet. Later episodes, especially the Sweet Pea episode, explore what it means to carry the shadow of the Lich within. His journey illustrates that despair never fully vanishes. It lingers, tempting, whispering, waiting, and that resilience is not a one-time victory, but an ongoing choice. From the moment Sweet Pea is introduced, his innocence stands in stark contrast to his origins. He is raised by Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig, two of Oo's gentlest, most eccentric figures. Their home is quiet, pastoral, almost comically mundane compared to the cosmic scale of the Lich's former existence. This juxtaposition is deliberate. The embodiment of annihilation now learns to toddle, giggle, and be loved in the most ordinary of settings. The series suggests that the antidote to despair is not only cosmic confrontation, but also simple acts of care. And yet, the shadow of the Lich lingers. Sweet Pea's design itself hints at his origins. His body is large, green, and hulking, a reminder of the Lich's form, even as his face radiates innocence. This tension becomes explicit in the Sweet Pea episode, where he is confronted by a mysterious hooded figure who recognizes his true nature. The figure tempts him, telling him he is destined to bring ruin, that the whispers of the void still reside within him. In this moment, the philosophy of the Lich resurfaces, not as a husk in the cosmos, but as a whisper in the mind of a child. Sweet Pea's struggle here is profound. Unlike Finn, who confronted the Lich from the outside, Sweet Pea must confront him from within. The void is not an external villain, but a part of his own identity. This dramatizes one of the deepest truths of Adventure Time. Despair is not always an enemy out there. Sometimes it is a voice inside, telling us we are meaningless. Sweet Pea's journey forces him to decide whether he will accept that voice or resist it. His resistance is one of the series' most powerful moments. When confronted with the claim that he is the Lich, Sweet Pea declares instead, "I'm not the Lich, I'm Sweet Pea." These words, simple yet defiant, mark a philosophical turning point. By naming himself, he asserts identity against inevitability. He chooses renewal over silence, innocence over despair. His declaration echoes Finn's refusal of the Lich's philosophy in the Comet. But here the resistance is even more intimate. It is not about defeating an external villain, but about choosing who to be when despair whispers within. This declaration also reframes the idea of inheritance. The Lich believed that inevitability is passed down, that collapse is unavoidable. Sweet Pea proves otherwise. Though he inherits the Lich's essence, he does not inherit his philosophy. He demonstrates that inheritance does not determine destiny. Choice reshapes legacy. In this way, Sweet Pea embodies the series' broader theme. Fragility does not erase meaning, it demands resilience. The Encheiridion's symbolic collapse parallels Sweet Pea's struggle. Just as the book was corrupted into a key for annihilation but reclaimed in memory, Sweet Pea carries corruption within him but reclaims his identity through choice. Both stories illustrate the same truth. Symbols and identities are fragile, vulnerable to hollowing, but not doomed. Meaning is not permanent, but it can be remade. Sweet Pea, like the Encayridion, proves that corruption is not the final word. Thematically, Sweet Pea's story also expands the philosophy of the Lich into a generational context. The Lich was obsessed with endings, insisting that silence is inevitable. Sweet Pea represents the continuation of life, proof that endings can give way to new beginnings. Yet his struggle shows that despair does not vanish simply because a new generation is born. It lingers, demanding resistance. This is why Sweet Pea's declaration is so powerful. He asserts that the new generation is not bound to the shadows of the past. This also reframes Finn's role. By defeating the Lich and allowing his rebirth, Finn created the possibility of Sweet Pea. But it is Sweet Pea himself who must decide who to be. This dynamic reflects the philosophy of resilience. Others can create opportunities, but each person must choose meaning for themselves. Finn could not fight Sweet Pea's battle. He could only create the conditions for it. Sweet Pea's victory proves that resilience is always personal. Symbolically, Sweet Pea also represents the fragility of innocence. He is not immune to despair. The whispers of the Lich within him remind us that innocence must always be defended. Yet this fragility does not make innocence meaningless. Instead, it makes it precious. Sweet Pea's survival and self-definition affirm that innocence, though vulnerable, is powerful precisely because it resists despair. His declaration that he is not the Lich but Sweet Pea is an affirmation of life's fragility as its strength. In the finale, though Sweet Pea does not play a central role, his presence in the epilogue reinforces this philosophy. Ooh continues, fragile yet enduring. Children like Sweet Pea grow, play, and live. The shadow of despair remains in the background, but it no longer defines the future. Renewal is not about erasing the past, but about reshaping it. Sweet Pea is living proof that even the embodiment of silence can become part of life's noisy continuation. Philosophically, Sweet Pea demonstrates the deepest refutation of the Lich's inevitability. Despair does not end simply because we confront it once. It resurfaces, sometimes within ourselves. But each time, it can be resisted. Each time, it can be reshaped. Sweet Pea proves that despair is not absolute, that identity can be chosen, and that the shadow of the void does not erase the possibility of meaning. The Encayridion's story and Sweet Pea's journey together reveal the heart of Adventure Time's philosophy. Fragility is not futility. Books can be corrupted, heroes can be hollowed, children can carry shadows. But none of this makes meaning impossible. It makes meaning necessary. Resistance is not a one-time act, but a daily choice. Renewal is not an abstract idea, but a lived practice. Sweet Pea, toddling and laughing in Ooh, is the clearest symbol of this truth. In the end, Sweet Pea and the shadow of the Lich remind us that despair is real, but not final. The void whispers, but voices can answer. Silence looms, but songs can rise. Identity is fragile, but it can be chosen. The Lich declared inevitability. Sweet Pea replies with possibility. And in that reply, the philosophy of the Lich collapses, not with his destruction, but with his transformation into life. Though the Lich is one of the most terrifying forces in Adventure Time, he is not the only embodiment of destruction in the cosmos. Beyond him exists Golb, a being so incomprehensible that even the Lich pales in comparison. While the Lich speaks inevitability with calm conviction, Golb simply acts, dissolving, transforming, and unmaking without words or intention. To understand the full scope of the Lich's philosophy, we must set it against Golb, the chaos that truly embodies the void. The Lich and Golb are not the same, though at first glance they seem aligned. Both represent endings, both bring silence, and both stand as threats to meaning. But their approaches differ. The Lich is articulate, persuasive, and philosophical. He explains why existence is a mistake. Golb, on the other hand, offers no explanation. He arrives and reality collapses. He does not whisper despair. He embodies it wordlessly. The Lich is the prophet. Golb is the silence itself. This distinction makes their relationship fascinating. The Lich's manipulation of the Encayridion demonstrates his need for tools, voices, and symbols. He corrupts Billy, he twists the book, he speaks to Finn. Golb needs none of this. He acts without language, without corruption, without disguise. The Lich is parasitic on meaning, always twisting it to his ends. Golb ignores meaning altogether. His destruction is total, not because he argues for it, but because he does not acknowledge meaning exists in the first place. When we set the Lich beside Golb, his philosophy becomes clearer. The Lich insists that annihilation is inevitable. Golb proves that annihilation is possible. The Lich whispers that all things collapse. Golb demonstrates it physically. Yet this comparison also diminishes the Lich. For all his calm declarations of inevitability, he is not the final word. He is only a voice, a shadow, a husk pointing towards something greater. His philosophy, terrifying though it is revealed to be partial. He is not inevitability itself, but a prophet gesturing toward the silence Golb embodies. Finn's encounters with both figures highlight this difference. With the Lich, Finn can argue, resist, and even philosophize. Their confrontations are not only battles, but dialogues. Finn matures by resisting the Lich's words, by rejecting despair through lived action. With Golb, there is no dialogue. In Come Along With Me, when Golb descends on U, the threat is beyond words. There is no speech to refute, no philosophy to debate. There is only collective resistance, embodied in community and song. The Lich forces individuals to articulate resilience. Golb forces communities to embody it. This contrast also reframes the Encayridion. The book, corrupted by the Lich, represents the fragility of symbols in the face of despair. But against Golb, symbols mean even less. Words cannot hold against pure dissolution. What matters is not books but bonds, not texts but communities. The Encayridion may have collapsed, but U survives Golb through connection and music. This demonstrates the ultimate limit of the Lich's philosophy. He overestimates the power of corruption and underestimates the resilience of community. Thematically, the Lich and Golb together represent two sides of despair. The Lich is despair articulated, explained and personified. Golb is despair enacted, chaotic and beyond articulation. By presenting both, Adventure Time explores despair as both idea and reality. The Lich makes despair persuasive. Golb makes it overwhelming. Yet in both cases, the response is the same. Resilience. Against the Lich, Finn resists with conviction. Against Golb, U resists with song. Both moments affirm that meaning, though fragile, is not futile. Sweet Pea's existence complicates this further. If the Lich is despair personified, then his transformation into a child proves that despair itself can be redefined. Golb cannot be transformed. His nature is too absolute, but the Lich can. This suggests that despair articulated is weaker than despair enacted. The Lich, for all his inevitability, is vulnerable to transformation. His philosophy collapses when he himself becomes proof of renewal. Golb, silent and incomprehensible, remains untransformed, resisted only through community. Symbolically, the Lich and Golb also frame the difference between fear and terror. The Lich is fear named, spoken, understood. He explains why annihilation matters. Golb is terror, nameless, beyond language, overwhelming. The Lich forces us to confront despair with arguments. Golb forces us to confront it with being. Both are necessary for the series to fully explore the void. Without the Lich, despair would lack articulation. Without Golb, despair would lack scale. Together, they define the spectrum of annihilation. Finn's growth across these encounters demonstrates the series' central philosophy. He learns from the Lich that despair must be resisted through conviction and choice. He learns from Golb that despair must be resisted collectively, through community and connection. Both lessons together prepare him for adulthood, teaching him that resilience is both personal and communal. The Lich sharpens his individual resolve. Golb deepens his sense of belonging. The Encayridion once again frames this lesson. Its corruption by the Lich demonstrates fragility. Its absence in the face of Golb demonstrates irrelevance. Symbols matter, but only insofar as they inspire action. When the book collapses, Finn learns to resist personally. When Golb arrives, U learns to resist communally. Both arcs reveal that meaning does not lie in texts or artifacts, but in choices and connections. In the end, the Lich and Golb together reveal the limits of inevitability. The Lich insists that annihilation is absolute. Golb demonstrates that annihilation is possible. Yet U survives both, fragile but enduring. The Lich is transformed into Sweet Pea, proving that despair can be redefined. Golb is resisted through song, proving that silence can be broken. Together, they affirm the heart of Adventure Time. Meaning is not permanent, but it persists through resilience. The Lich is terrifying because he speaks inevitability. Golb is terrifying because he does not need to speak at all. But both fail. Their philosophies collapse not because they are destroyed, but because life continues. U endures. Finn grows. Communities sing. Sweet Pea plays. Against silence, voices rise. Against inevitability, renewal continues. By the time Adventure Time reaches its finale, Come Along With Me, the Lich himself no longer stands at the centre of U's struggles. His skeletal husk has already been transformed into Sweet Pea, and his philosophy of inevitability has been philosophically dismantled in Finn's confrontation at the Catalyst Comet. And yet, even in his absence, the shadow of the Lich lingers. His voice, his silence, his corruption of meaning, all of these shape how U responds to the greater threat of Golb. The finale demonstrates that even when despair's profit is gone, his philosophy remains part of the landscape. The central threat of the finale is Golb, a being of incomprehensible chaos and annihilation. Unlike the Lich, Golb does not articulate despair. He does not explain inevitability or mock ideals. He simply dissolves, transforms, and unravels. His presence is terrifying precisely because it is wordless, and yet the resonance of the Lich remains. For years, he was the voice that prepared us to fear silence. He was the prophet who explained why annihilation was inevitable. In the finale, Golb enacts what the Lich only promised. The silence the Lich described becomes embodied, given form. In this sense, the Lich's absence is not a disappearance, but a haunting. The battle against Golb is the continuation of the battle against despair, only magnified. Every song, every act of community, every moment of resilience echoes earlier confrontations with the Lich. Finn's refusal of inevitability in the comet prepares him for the collective refusal of silence in the finale. Sweet Pea's existence, a living contradiction of despair, prepares U to believe that even annihilation can be resisted. The Lich's absence allows the finale to show the endurance of resilience beyond his presence. The Encayridion, though long gone by the finale, still lingers symbolically as well. Once corrupted by the Lich, it represented the fragility of symbols. In the finale, that fragility is echoed in the collapse of entire kingdoms under Golb's attack. Just as the Encayridion could be twisted, so too can castles crumble, armies fail, and heroes falter. Yet as before, meaning is not erased. Communities sing, stories are told, and life continues. The finale shows that even in the absence of books or symbols, resilience endures in voices and relationships. Marceline's song, with bubblegum, during the climax, is a particularly clear response to the Lich's philosophy. Where he insisted on silence, they answer with music. Where he declared that life is futile, they sing that connection matters. The act of singing together embodies the rejection of inevitability. It proves that meaning does not come from permanence, but from fragile, fleeting acts of love. This musical defiance is the culmination of the resistance first staged against the Lich's declarations in earlier seasons. His absence does not erase his relevance, it sharpens it. The finale also demonstrates the communal dimension of resilience. The Lich confronted individuals, Finn, Billy, even Bubblegum, when she was corrupted. His strategy was to hollow out symbols and idols one by one, proving that meaning collapses. GOLB, by contrast, threatens everyone at once. The response, accordingly, must be communal. U resists not through the triumph of a single hero, but through the unity of many voices. This collective resilience demonstrates that despair cannot be resisted only individually. It must be resisted together. The absence of the Lich in the finale allows this broader truth to emerge. Sweet Pea's survival into the epilogue cements the finale's dialogue with the Lich's philosophy. The child who once carried the essence of annihilation now plays happily in a world that survived Golb. His presence is quiet but profound. He is the ultimate refutation of inevitability, the prophet of silence reborn as a child in a world that continues. Even though the Lich is absent, his shadow is transformed into innocence, and his legacy becomes one of possibility. This absence also reflects the humility of Adventure Time's storytelling. Many series would bring back their greatest villain for a climactic final battle. Adventure Time instead leaves the Lich behind, trusting that his influence has already shaped the story's philosophy. By the finale, the struggle is no longer about defeating despair's prophet, but about living with despair's reality. Golb embodies that reality, and U resists it. The absence of the Lich proves that the series is not interested in repetition, but in growth. His shadow lingers, but the focus shifts to what comes after. Philosophically, the finale demonstrates that resilience does not depend on the presence of despair. The Lich was the voice of inevitability, but even without him, U must choose meaning. This reflects the truth of life. Despair is not always embodied in an enemy we can confront directly. Sometimes it is ambient, part of the world itself. The finale shows that resilience must endure even when despair is not personified. The Lich's absence, then, is not a gap, but a lesson. Meaning must be chosen even without a clear opponent. The Encheiridion's absence echoes this point. Earlier, the book provided a tangible symbol of heroism and meaning. Its corruption was devastating, and its loss forced Finn to create meaning without it. The finale extends this lesson. There is no book, no artifact, no husk of inevitability to confront. There is only community, memory, and song. Meaning is lived, not inherited. The absence of both the Lich and the Encayridion forces U to embody resilience in its purest form. Symbolically, the finale also reframes the scale of despair. The Lich whispered inevitability, preparing us for endings. Golb enacted endings on a cosmic scale, testing whether meaning could endure. The fact that U survives proves that the Lich's philosophy was not absolute. His absence is therefore not a diminishment, but a confirmation. The series did not need him in the final battle, because his philosophy had already been refuted. The finale simply demonstrated that refutation on a larger canvas. In the end, the absence of the Lich in the finale speaks volumes. His shadow lingers in the threat of Golb, in the fragility of kingdoms, and in the resilience of communities. His philosophy of inevitability echoes through the silence, but U answers with song. The Encayridion may be gone, but its legacy of fragility and reclamation persists in every act of resistance. Sweet Pea plays in the epilogue, living proof that despair can be transformed. The Lich's absence, paradoxically, is his final presence. He remains not in his husk, but in the resilience he provoked. When adventure time ends, the Lich is no longer the skeletal prophet of despair who stalked Oo's shadows. He has been transformed into Sweet Pea, a child raised in love, far from the void he once embodied. Yet his legacy remains profound. The Lich is not remembered for victories or for dominating the story, but for embodying a philosophy so chilling that every character and every viewer was forced to confront it. His legacy is not destruction, but the resilience he provoked in others. To understand the Lich's place in Adventure Time is to see him as more than a villain, as the voice of inevitability that sharpened the series' exploration of meaning, fragility, and renewal. The Lich's legacy begins in fear. In his earliest appearances, he is not simply a monster, but inevitability given form. Trapped in amber beneath the tree fort, he waits like a buried trauma, a reminder that despair can be contained, but never destroyed. When he speaks, he does not threaten, he declares. Fool, you are alone, child. His words are less threats than pronouncements, as though he is merely stating the way things are. This articulation of inevitability, calm, final, and certain, defines his role in Oo. He is not danger to be overcome, but despair to be resisted. His corruption of the Encayridion cements this role. A book meant to guide heroes becomes a key to annihilation. What was once sacred is hollowed, proof of his philosophy that nothing endures. For Finn, this corruption is devastating. The Encayridion had validated his identity as a hero, linking him to a lineage of defenders of Oo. To see it twisted into a tool of despair was to see meaning itself collapse. Yet this collapse forced Finn to grow. He learned that symbols can be corrupted, but meaning survives in choice. The Lich's corruption of the Encayridion meant to prove inevitability, instead sharpened resilience. Billy's hollowing echoes the same lesson. As Finn's idol, Billy represented the embodiment of heroism. When the Lich wore his body, he declared that even ideals are fragile. But in hollowing Billy, the Lich ensured that his fall would be remembered. Oo chose to carry forward the memory of Billy's true courage, refusing to let despair define him. The Lich tried to erase meaning, but instead provoked memory. His corruption of idols proved that despair can hollow symbols, but resilience can reclaim them. The confrontation at the Catalyst Comet revealed the heart of his philosophy. Reduced to a husk, the Lich calmly explained that existence is a mistake, that life is suffering, and that non-existence is the cure. This was his purest declaration of inevitability. Yet beside the comet, a cosmic symbol of renewal, his words rang hollow. The universe itself contradicted him, offering cycles of continuation against his promise of silence. Finn's refusal to accept his words, not with elaborate arguments, but with lived conviction, proved that fragility does not erase meaning. The comet's renewal undermined inevitability, transforming the prophet of silence into Sweet Pea. Sweet Pea's existence is the clearest piece of the Lich's legacy. Born from despair, he embodies innocence, fragility, and possibility. His declaration, "I'm not the Lich, I'm Sweet Pea," proves that identity can be chosen against inevitability. His survival into the finale's epilogue shows that despair is never final. Even the embodiment of annihilation can be reshaped into life. This transformation reframes the Lich's legacy. He is remembered not only as despair's prophet, but as proof that despair can be redefined. The Encayridion's story parallels this transformation. Once corrupted into a key for annihilation, it was lost as a book, but preserved in memory. Its lessons lived on in Finn, who embodied heroism without needing its pages. The Lich's corruption proved fragility. Finn's resilience proved possibility. Sweet Pea echoes this arc. Born from despair, he chooses life. Both the book and the child demonstrate that inevitability is never the final word. Meaning can be remade, identity can be reclaimed, and despair can be resisted. The finale extends the Lich's legacy beyond himself. Though absent, his philosophy haunts the battle with Golb. Oo's communities resist not by defeating a prophet, but by refusing silence itself. Music, memory, and unity become their weapons. The Lich had prepared them for this. By whispering inevitability, he forced Oo to learn resilience. His absence in the finale is itself a statement. The resilience he provoked now endures without him. Oo no longer needs to confront the Lich directly. They have internalized the lesson that despair, though persistent, can always be resisted. Philosophically, the Lich's legacy is paradoxical. He embodied inevitability, yet he proved fragility instead. He sought to erase meaning, yet he strengthened memory. He whispered silence, yet he inspired song. His philosophy was never refuted by argument, but by transformation and resilience. Sweet Pea's laughter is louder than his silence. Finn's refusal is stronger than his declaration. Oo's survival is longer than his inevitability. The Lich failed not because he was destroyed, but because life continued. Symbolically, the Lich remains the shadow that gave Oo's light definition. Without him, the series could not have explored despair so fully. He forced characters to confront fragility, corruption, and endings. He showed that despair is persuasive, that symbols can fail, that idols can fall. And in provoking these crises, he ensured that resilience would be sharpened. His legacy is not only in what he was, but in what he provoked others to become. Finn became a true hero, not by defeating monsters, but by resisting inevitability. Oo became a resilient community, not by avoiding collapse, but by rebuilding after it. Even in Sweet Pea, the shadow lingers. The child carries within him the possibility of despair, but his choice to affirm life demonstrates the ongoing nature of resilience. Despair never disappears. It whispers, tempts, and resurfaces, but each time it can be resisted. Sweet Pea proves that resilience is not a one-time act, but a continual choice. This is the deepest lesson of the Lich's legacy. Inevitability is not an absolute law, but a temptation resisted through daily acts of meaning. In the end, the Lich's legacy is unity through opposition. He connected individuals, communities, and even generations by forcing them to confront despair together. He linked Finn to the heroes of the past, from the Encayridion to Billy. He linked Oo to the cosmos, from the Catalyst Comet to Golb. He even linked despair to renewal, from his husk to Sweet Pea. His rainbow-shaped absence stretches across Oo, not as a victory, but as a shadow that made resilience possible. The Lich's philosophy declared that all things end in silence. Adventure Time replies that endings are beginnings, that silence can be broken, that despair can be transformed. His legacy is not annihilation, but resilience, not futility, but renewal. He remains unforgettable not because he destroyed Oo, but because he forced Oo to affirm life. In that way, the Lich will always haunt the series, not as inevitability, but as the shadow that proved meaning endures.